Hello again. In today's video, we shall talk equality, specifically how it exists or doesn't, and how policies impact that. Now, quick shout out before we begin, because Dalton commented on one of my posts. For those who don't know, and who are curious, Dalton is my brother. And while he decided for YouTube to focus on fitness, something he's really good at, I said to focus on talking about politics and helping my friend. It's also worth noting, he has helped me a bit in becoming more fit, so while I'm hardly strong or fit, I'm a lot better than I used to be. Now, back to the main topic. Equality. I am an Alaskan. As a result, certain things are different from others. The same would be true if I was born in, say, Texas, California, or any other state. But that is just the rules of man, one might ask. Oh, what about my skills? Am I different from others? Yes. Take my brother as an easy example. He can easily bench press his own weight and do far more than I could ever hope to when it comes to fitness. Anyone who watches his videos can see that clearly. He is massively in shape. As a matter of fact, his entire channel is dedicated to charting his strength and how he goes about becoming even more in shape and better for himself. That being said, it is also important to note that I have my own advantages. Whatever they are, I don't know, but I do. Even at birth, we had our differences. Despite him being 5 years older than me, we can still attest to that. And so, even us brothers have differences. As a matter of fact, you could take identical twins of another family and compare them, and you'll still find differences between them. Because, in the end, equality is not a natural thing. Equality does not exist in the wild. If you were to throw 100 people in the wild and watch what happens, you would not see equal results. Nor would you see them be the exact same, even if they started at roughly the same place or roughly the same skill level. Equality does not happen naturally. It can happen when no one else is interfering, because equality is based on something that is unnatural. Things being balanced and fair. That does not happen in nature. Normally. As a matter of fact, it doesn't happen in nature at all. And so, equality cannot happen in a state of nature. If you were to take away all the governments right now, completely abolish every single government, there would be a hierarchy forming within 2 minutes. And you would see new states start to arise. You cannot abolish, as you may wish, the hierarchy of a state and replace it with a completely balanced system, because that won't work. Equality does not happen in nature. Now, what about under the guise of the state? If the state's directing things, surely they can make things equal, right? Well, no. And not in any form. You do not have equality under the law, equality of opportunity, or equality of outcome under the state. And I can explain why for every single one of them. Let's start with the obvious, equality of outcome. The difference in power, let's say for a state to exist, by its very function, cannot have equal outcomes. Because someone has to be running the state. and that someone, whoever they are, will be more powerful than everyone else. No matter how split out you try to make the power structure, those in charge will always have more, and thus the outcomes will always be different, especially if they decide to use that power to, say, take bribes or do other things so that they benefit at the expense of law and order. Okay then, well, if equality of outcomes is impossible, what about equality of opportunity? Because that's what everyone promises, right? Again, no. Different people have different opportunities. Let's use my brother and I as an example. If I wish to pursue a job, let's say on an oil rig, I would not have the strength. And it likely would be the same case in the military. My brother absolutely could. He's got the strength and then some. Now, he may not want to do it, but he has that opportunity to pursue those jobs however he so wishes. At the same time, even if we remove every benefit and just had the state's only way of functioning being making sure that people aren't killing each other, so just enforcing law and order, well, no business gives any benefits or nepotism, you would still see a difference in outcome. Even if two people were applying for college, and there's no rule about alumni's relatives being able to get in easier, no DEI programs, none of it, even if all that were removed, there's still going to be a difference because those two people are going to be different. There's no way you are going to have two people who are the exact same applying to a college. So one's going to have an easier time, and thus more opportunities, than the other. That is just how things work. It's true in other regards as well. The rich will always have an advantage in opportunities because they can always hire the best, which allows them to learn a lot more. Women, for example, also have an advantage, especially in our school system when it comes to education. Now, am I going to berate them for it? Not really. Don't really care that much. I may argue that things need to be more efficient, and thus we need to find a way to make it work for men as well, but not really a key point of my platform. However, those advantages they have still affect their opportunities, and it makes it easier for women to get into the workplace, even without DEI programs. Saying it another way, women, thanks to advantages due to structure and how they handle situations, will have advantages getting jobs just by how it is. Now, if you take it on the individual level, there will be men who surpass them, men who don't, and women who don't live up to their promise. That'll happen. But when it comes down to it, that equality of opportunity does not exist in function. Instead, what you see is people will always, to some extent, have differences in ability resulting in different outcomes. Now, where some might complain about this, I see this as perfectly fine. Differences in outcomes are more than fine if it results in a better world, which generally you can allow for. If everyone's a jack of all trades and master of none, we would not have the specialization necessary to build the world as it currently exists. We just wouldn't. There is no way in this world to have everyone perfectly competent at the exact same thing without losing the ability to specialize. That is just reality. And now to the more bold claim. Even equality under the law is impossible. Now, that does not mean people aren't still affected by the law, all under it. However, you will not have equal judgment under the law or in person. For example, if you're on the jury and you hear a court case, and you hear one, the victim was a poor person who did their crime out of desperation, would you go easier on that person than if you heard this person was known for enjoying the crime they committed? You're likely going to, because, extenuating circumstances make it a better option. But is that equality under the law? An equal judgment? No, equal judgment holds they committed the same crime, the same offense, so they should receive the same punishment. But that's not how the courts work. And that's not how human judgment works. You could see two people do the exact same thing, and how you judge them will be entirely different depending on surrounding knowledge. For example, in a lot of shows, this is shown clearly. There are people who will 100% tolerate a person who kills someone just because they've watched them for longer and they believe firmly that that person's in the right. Meanwhile, if a villain just kills a person, they will, generally speaking, freaking hate them. Humans are interesting like that. Our emotions, whether it's on screen or in person, are dependent on pre-existing knowledge. Also, tribalistic bias, but that's another story. What this means, in effect, is that when something happens that we dislike and we know who committed it, we edit our judgments based on pre-existing knowledge of them. For example, let's say someone said my brother committed assault, and another person said some random person committed an assault that I don't know. Now, I would be far more willing to believe my brother if he said I didn't do it than some random person, because I know him and make judgments based off of that. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, whether he actually did. Just him being related to me and being my brother is enough to change how I view things. Because I like my brother, because he's a good brother. And that is very noticeable. When it comes down to it, people will always have their own biases, which make an equal judgment impossible. And that's not even factoring in people who are mentally scarred from certain events. For example, someone who was betrayed by a man will tend to see men in a less favorable light, if not actively reject them if it happens multiple times. That person, when they hear a man has done something wrong, will not hold the same feelings of mercy as someone who every male figure in their life was kind to them. Because we build connections with groups and individuals based on what we know about them. So there can be no equal judgment. There just can't. Because the scales, by their nature, are not equal. Instead, they tip to those we know personally and understand. At the same time, if we know someone, but they show themselves, in our opinion, to be generally a negative person, well, then we're going to expect negative things of them. For example, take the phrase Trump derangement syndrome. It describes this pretty well because regardless of what liberals think of Trump's policies, generally they still don't like it, but even when he does good things, generally they still berate him because when you build up this negative association with someone, because they really have with Trump, then any action they do is going to be put through a negative lens first. Trump could quite literally save the whole population, of the world even, from starvation. And they would still find a reason to hate him because he, to them, is a bad person who has committed things they don't like. As a result, they take the worst views of him and assume the worst. We do this with the other side as well. For example, I'm a conservative. I don't exactly view Obama in the best light, so when he does something good, I usually don't trust it. How moral is that? Debatable, but regardless of it, that's how people think. Whether it be due to association, like for example, Democrats and Republicans, individual actions, which are interpreted through certain lenses, like Trump and the many, many scandals he's had, or just because you're bored. There are entirely people who just say, I'm just going to hold this position because I don't know what else to do. There will always be, at some level, a difference in judgment. You cannot have an equal judgment, therefore, because every single person in the situation is making a different one. And as such, it being just or unjust entirely depends on personal context. With that being said, there's another factor as well. See, the state itself is an unequal force. One might say the state allows for equality to exist. The liberals say that, but it's not true. The state, by its nature, as a monopoly on force, is inherently a superior entity, an unequal one. Also, I'm currently being interrupted by a dog who demands pets. So, I'm going to be doing that for a bit, sorry. See, the state, because of its nature as a monopoly on force, has a duty and a role, enforcing the law. What this means is, if, say, a criminal tries to commit an offense, they must be caught, arrested, and punished. As a result, the state must inherently be stronger than them, and every other criminal who attempts to do the same. This, however, requires inequality, because how do you compete with someone who is willing to break the law in order to do what they want? Well, you gotta use force, or some other unequal method to subdue them. How exactly doesn't fully matter so long as it happens. But this does mean, inherently, that the state must be unequal, because it must stand above those who seek to do others harm. Because if a criminal is able to do something against the law and not be punished, then what happens? Well, because of that, they effectively become a superior entity and being, because they can do stuff that others can't without punishment. It is the state who says, no, you cannot do that. If anything, they push them even further down to make the point. You cannot break the law without punishment. You cannot betray the people without severe consequences. And if you do, you will be at the bottom. The state, by its very nature, creates a hierarchy based on force and enforced, by the state. For example, take the police. If you have someone break into your house and you shoot them in self-defense to ensure that your property and person are not harmed, the state is going to investigate under the assumption that you could be charged with something. They'll say, all right, is this self-defense or have you committed a crime? They basically always question it. If a police officer, for example, shoots a person because they charged at them, there is less of that, because they are enforcers of the state's will. The only people who are questioning it are the people themselves, not the state. The state will just say, yeah, it's likely justified, but if the people ask, we can always double check. There is an inherent justification for the state's actors to use force, and so they're the only ones who can use force without question. As a result, they are inherently above. Now, how much this is, you could debate all the time, but it is this being above others that is necessary for the state's role to function. You cannot, and I do mean this literally, you cannot under any circumstances, allow civil disorder to cause damage to other people. Unfortunately, it's pretty much guaranteed, but it's the state's role to reduce that and punish those who try as severely as necessary to ensure that those who are following the law, who are innocent civilians, are safe and who don't have to worry about a criminal coming up and stealing their food or their house. Or maybe their Yu-Gi-Oh collection, who knows? Some people collect weird things. But regardless of what it is, the state must protect the civilians. And so that necessitates its superiority of force. And if it uses it properly, then it is acting as an unequal player in the hierarchy of society. Politicians, too, are in a superior position. Not because of the whole, being a member of the state thing, but because they get a choice in the laws that the state must enforce. So, if, for example, a politician wishes to pass a law that, say, gives everyone a free kitten, maybe they're being generous today, they have the power to make that actually happen, versus some random bum on the street who says, we should make a law guaranteeing everyone a free kitten. Yeah, that person's not going to be taken seriously. They'll be like Joshua Norton. No, actually, Norton was probably funnier. Anyways, this inherent part of the hierarchy where those who lead the state and enforce the state's will are above the rest is just a basic part of the hierarchy. Now, the rich also are generally in a superior spot, but they're still not up here usually. For as much as Musk had influence, even on the Trump administration, he's still not more powerful than Trump or most senators. He just has the wealth to nudge the people above him and say, maybe you should do this. That does not stop the people at the top from just taking his money and saying, yeah, we're good. Now, all that being said, he's still far more influential than I ever would. But that is very different from being more powerful than those at the top. Hierarchy by its nature, stratified or not, will always have the state, its enforcers, and those who make its laws at the top, without question. So long as there's a state, that'll be true. It's when you go down that you see the question of how hierarchy should be handled. And overall, I think it's very simple. Hierarchy is a necessary thing. Not necessarily evil, but a necessary good. Because you need this structure in order for society to work. So, the simple answer is, let the hierarchy exist. Let people have different ranks and rungs. But let them be judged based on their actions and their merits. So, for example, a person who decides to, destroy a bunch of property goes down. Those who decide to build a bunch of houses go up. Let merit rule. For if merit rules, then people are judged by their skills, and you encourage people to actually develop them. So let us have merit. Let us have a better world. It's not that